Hi everyone, this is Suman from Decode Now. Welcome to the lecture series on building a Spring Boot application to perform basic CRUD operations. In the previous video, we installed Python and saw that our post endpoint was working as expected. It was successfully adding the personal details to our personal details table. So let's just mark that as completed in our to-do list. Download and install Postman is now completed. And the next thing we have to do is create a get endpoint. So we'll be creating this get endpoint using which we can get the data or details stored in our repository. So for that, let me jump into the code. This is our controller class. We'll be creating a method where we will be retrieving this particular personal details data. So let me say public, and the return type of this will be list of personal details. So list of personal details is our entity class, list of personal details, and the name will be something like get all, and it accepts no parameter. So there will be nothing inside those brackets, open close lower brackets, and in here I'll have to call our service class in order to perform the logic, but there is no method yet in the service class, so let us create a method there. I'll say public. The return type of this is also list of type personal details, and the name will be, let's say, get all. This also accepts no parameters. What this should do is it should go to my personal details repo and do find all. So this is what it should do. It should go to my repository and find all the details that is present there and return that. So since the return type is list of personal details, let me create an object of type list of personal details. Give it a name personal details list and assign it to null. And I'll say personal details list is equal to personal details repo dot find all. And at the end, I'll just return personal details list. So now from the controller class, when we call this get all method without any parameters, it will just create an object of type list of personal details, and then it will get the value by calling find all method from the personal details repo. The find all method is also a method which is provided by the JPA interface. Since we are extending it for our personal details repo, we can make use of that. And then finally we are returning that particular personal details list. Let's come to our constructor class and say list of personal details and give it the name personal details list and assign it to null. And let's call our service class, which is the personal details service dot the method get all. And this particular get all method is returning a value of type list of personal details. So we'll just assign it to personal details list. And at the end, we'll just return personal details list. So this is our method where we will call the service class, and in the service class we'll call the repository and find all the details present in there and just return that. So in the controller class, since this is a get endpoint, I'll mark it with the annotation get mapping of, and of inside the brackets I'll give the URL as let me say get all. So let's see what is this get mapping annotation. At get mapping annotation is used in Spring Boot to handle the HTTP GET request. If you remember in the post endpoint, we used similar annotation called at post mapping that was to mark that particular endpoint as a post endpoint, and get mapping says that this is a get endpoint. So that's the use of at get mapping annotation. So everything looks fine for me. Let's test whether this particular get endpoint is working as expected. For that, let me run the application in the port 8080. So the Tomcat started on port 8080. Let's jump into our Postman. First, let me add some data. Let me say, uh, let me hit the post endpoint to create the data. It is success. And then I'll click on this plus button, a get endpoint. I'll say local host 8080 slash details slash get all. So this is the endpoint which we'll be calling. There is no request body or it does not accept any parameters. I'll just say send. And now you can see that the Sumant S India was added successfully. Let me create one more thing saying decode now and click send. It was a success. And if I hit the get endpoint now, along with the Sumant data, we should also see the decode now data. Yes, so it is fetching all the records in the personal details table. So our get endpoint is working exactly as expected. So what if I just wanted to get a single data? Let's say I just wanted to fetch the decode now data and I did not want to get the any other data which was present in the table. That is also possible. So for that, let us create another get endpoint. Let's say in the controller class, I'll close this console. In the controllers class, I'll say public. And what are we expecting? We are expecting just a single object of type personal details. So it's not a list, but instead it's we are expecting personal details as the return type. And we'll say get by ID. We are accepting one parameter, which is a path variable. What do I mean by this? What do I mean by path variable? So there is one annotation called path variable. So in the URL itself, along with this particular URI path which we are mentioning, right, we'll also send the ID of the data which we need, and using that we can retrieve only that particular object. So how can we do that? Let me say at get mapping, and in the URL I'll say get by ID slash, and the path variable is always mentioned in flower brackets, and I'll say ID. So this is how it looks when we are trying to get a path variable in the URL itself, and we will pass that particular path variable as a parameter in our method in the controller. So it would be something like integer ID. So integer ID is nothing but the ID which is being passed here in the URL itself. So let's see what this path variable annotation does. Path variable is an annotation which is used in Spring Boot to extract variables from the URL path. As I mentioned here ID is the variable which is present in our URL path, and we are trying to extract that using at path variable annotation. We can use them as method parameters in a controller class. So for our get by ID method, we are using it as a parameter. It allows us to capture dynamic values from the URL and pass them as arguments to a controller method. So this ID can be anything. For one of the endpoints, it can be 1. For the other endpoint, it can be 2. It is dynamic. So it helps us to capture those dynamic values and use it as parameters in our constructor, as parameter in our controller methods. So let's open and close curly braces. And now we'll have to call the service class for the business logic. But we don't have any method here, so let me create a method in service class. I'll say public. The return type is personal details, and the name of the method is get by ID. It is not accept. Okay, it accepts one parameter which is of type integer. Let's say it's ID. And here I'll just create an object of type personal details and assign it null. Personal details is equal to, I'll call the personal details repo and say dot find by ID, and it accepts an integer as a parameter, which is our ID. So I'll just pass in ID. Okay, there is one exception here, which is provided optional. Okay, so that is resolved. Now I'll just return personal details. Got it. So what this is saying, this when we perform this particular find by ID, there might be a personal detail record found, or there may not be found. So in that case, we use something called optional. So the value that is present in this particular object is optional. Let's say I have two records here, right? With ID 1 and with ID 2. If I pass in ID 1, I'll definitely get an object of personal details, that is the Sumant S and address as India. But if I pass the ID as 3, there is no record with ID 3, then this particular personal details will be null. So that's the reason the return type is not just the personal details, but an optional of personal details. It can be either null or a value might be present. So we're returning personal details here. So we'll have to change the same here also. We'll say optional of personal details. And then we'll create an object of type personal details and assign it to null. And then we'll say personal details is equal to we'll call the service class, which is the personal details service dot get by ID, and pass in the ID which we receive as path variable there. And here also it is saying that the required type is personal details and the provided is optional. We'll just change the variable personal data type, personal details to optional. So now you can see that it's of type optional. This personal details is of type optional. And we'll just say return personal details. So I think that is all is required for this get by ID method. Let me stop the server and run it again. So now the server is up and running. Let me go to Postman and create few details before getting it. I'll say I created one record. I'll create one more record saying Sumantas. I'll create one more record saying a month HS, and I'll use the other endpoint, other get endpoint, where we get all the details. If I hit that, I'm getting all the three records. So now we'll be using one more get endpoint where we say localhost 8080 slash details slash get by ID slash, here we have to pass the ID. I'll just pass in 1 currently and say send. We are getting 404. Let's see if there is any error message in the console. There is nothing here. Okay, so it's my bad. I missed the I in the details spelling. So hopefully that was the issue. Let me click send again, and I can receive the decode now, which was the uh, first record. If I want to get this third record, I'll just change the ID to 3 and hit send. Now I am able to receive that. So these are the two get endpoints. The first endpoint gets us all the data which is present in that particular table, and this particular get endpoint gets us only the ID of the record which we pass. Let's say let me pass an ID which is not present, something like 67. and if I hit send, I receive it as null. This is possible because our personal details object is of type optional. That's why this is possible, or else we would have encountered with a null pointer exception. So this is all about this video. If you have learned something new, please do subscribe to our channel and support us. If you have any questions, suggestions or requests, please let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to like the video. See you in the next video.